Hello and welcome back. Well, today's camera is going to be a little bit of a departure for me because it's a camera that I've not actually used before. So this will be the first time I'm using it here on this video. And the camera is this Kodak Recomar 18, which I've dated this copy to 1936. Now what makes this camera interesting is it is a small format view camera, and originally was designed to shoot plates, glass plate negatives. The plate size is 2 1/4 by 3 1/4, or in European notation that's 6.5 by 9 centimeters. And as you can see, the camera is quite small, very easily held in the hand, about the same size as a standard like 35mm camera or any other handheld camera. So it's very portable. It's just a simple little box, not a lot to it. Now, the Kodak Recomar series was actually a continuation of a series of cameras that was originally introduced by the Nagel company, which was a German company started in 1928 by Dr. August Nagel. I'm not pronouncing that in the correct German way, but he has his own interesting story, which I may touch on a little bit later in this video. So Dr. Nagel ended up selling his Nagel Camera Corporation to Kodak in 1932, and that corporation continued as Kodak AG, which was Kodak's German manufacturer and distributor. And essentially what they did is they continued Dr. Nagel's products that he had already made under the Nagel brand. So the Kodak Recomar 18 is actually a direct continuation of the Nagel 18 that came before it, and in fact looks identical other than the Kodak versus Nagel branding. The camera comes with a Compur shutter, and the shutter has speeds ranging from 1 second up to 250th of a second, and of course includes time and bulb. And I've taken a look at the shutter, and all the shutter speeds seem to be really strong, so I'm excited to give this one a shot. The lens has basic movements, so you can do lens rise with this dial here, and then lens shift with this dial here. So as you rack the focus forward on the scale past the infinity stop, then you have the option of using the focus scale to set your focus. It's scaled down to 4 feet. Although the bellows themselves are double extension bellows, so as you can see, it has quite a long throw, and you can focus down to just a few inches, I believe. Now, being a view camera, of course, the primary focus aid is actually not the scale, but it is the ground glass, which is on the back. You open the little hood, and then inside the hood is the ground glass focusing system. The trick is, I found this camera from a thrift store, and the camera, since I did purchase it from a thrift store, it did not come with the original glass plate backs that the camera was originally produced with. So I've had to figure out other ways to take pictures with this camera, and I've been able to track down a couple of very interesting options. The first of which is this Rada roll film holder. This roll film holder takes 120 film, so readily available film, and shoots a 6:9 negative on that 120 film. So it's not quite the same size as the 6.5:9 native size of the camera, but it's really close. So that's going to be one exciting option that will allow me a whole range of different film options in the camera. Now, the second and perhaps even more interesting option is a film pack back. I was able to locate this Voigtlander film pack back. Film packs have not been produced since the mid-1970s, but this back that I located actually has a pack of film in it, a 12 exposure pack. And the film type, as I am looking at the tags here, is Kodak Verichrome pan. So I know Verichrome pan was introduced in the late 1950s, and I know that film packs were no longer produced by the mid-1970s. So I don't know the exact age of this film, but it's probably from the mid-1960s, I would guess. I've had really good luck with Verichrome pen in the past, and so I have high hopes for this to be able to work. So that's 12 exposures there. That's going to be another interesting experiment with expired film. And I believe this will actually shoot in the 6.5 by 9 format, so I should get slightly larger negatives with this film. So all in all, this is going to be a fun little experiment and my first foray into a view camera use.
So the first thing to do is to load up the Rada roll film back. As you can see, I am shooting Ilford's HP5 Plus, and the main reason I'm choosing this film is for the 400 speed. The lens on this camera is relatively slow by modern standards at f4.5, so I just want to make sure I get as much film speed as I can. So I'll be able to shoot in varying conditions. After getting the film loaded, I did consult with the manual, which I have, just to make sure I understood how to track the film in the little windows. So even though I'm using roll film in this camera and not plates or cut sheet film, the process is still fairly slow and took a little while for me to get used to working at a very different pace with basically view camera settings. So getting the camera set up on the tripod, taking my meter readings, opening up the lens, the shutter with the time function so the shutter stays open, carefully focusing on the ground glass, which I learned my lesson. I need to get a hood, cover for myself to get a little bit darker, and then pulling out the ground glass and inserting the roll film back, taking out the dark slide, ensuring that I have the shutter closed. All of these things, just very methodical and a much different approach for me, but very interesting at the same time. The slow pace of working with this camera definitely lends itself more towards still lifes and static subjects. It definitely forces you to slow down and consider what you're shooting and think about the whole process step by step, which is something that I often struggle with. Using this camera was actually a really good practice in patience for me, and I'm glad I did it. I'm actually looking forward to trying it again. And it's not just that the camera itself takes some time to set up and shoot. It's the whole process of finding compositions, finding things to shoot. You've only got 8 exposures, which doesn't seem like much, but at the pace that you use this camera, it actually takes quite a while to get through those 8 exposures. Okay, well, what exactly went wrong here with the lovely Recomar camera? So many problems. The square format was a big surprise. Wasn't expecting that. And then clearly a lot of light leaks. You can see here as I was loading the camera, everything seemed to be going smoothly. I didn't see any problems at this point, but oh wait, did you notice? And there it is. Do you see it? I hadn't even noticed that there is already a 6x6 frame installed in the back. It also came with a 6x4.5 frame. And I loaded it up blithely without realizing it and thinking I was going to be shooting 6x9. I just carried on. Now, I didn't want to hide any of this. I just wanted to show you all the mistakes and errors that I made while shooting with this camera. It does serve me right to some extent using a camera that I'd never used before as part of this video. But again, I didn't want to hide any of the problems and just show that there's definitely a lot of mistakes that are made on the way to making better pictures. But I was really impressed with the results of the camera, the elements that did come through, and I am looking forward to shooting with the camera again. These two pictures in particular, I thought were incredibly sharp. This close-up of a vase, which I shot at about 10 inches, and then this downtown Seattle scene on the original images are very sharp, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what this camera can do. Now, I did want to give a brief background on Dr. August Nagel, just because he does have kind of an interesting story. Dr. Nagel is recognized as one of the most important figures in German camera history and has influence worldwide as well. Dr. Nagel started a company called Contessa in the early 20th century, and that company produced cameras up through the 1920s and then was part of the major merger of 5 different German companies in 1926 that became Zeiss Ikon. Now, between 1926 and 1928, Dr. Nagel served, I believe, on the board of directors of the new Zeiss Ikon conglomerate. But either through being ousted or by quitting, it's not entirely clear. He left Zeiss Ikon in 1928 and went on to start his own company called the Nagel Camera Corporation, or the German equivalent of that title. Now, he operated this company from 1928 until 1932, so just 4 short years, and then sold the company to Kodak, who already had a presence in Germany, and that became Kodak AG, for which August Nagel was the lead designer for a few years. Now, the interesting that happened under Kodak leadership is Kodak came out with a new camera called the Kodak Retina in 1934, I believe, and as part of that release, they also introduced a new 35mm film cartridge, which ended up becoming the standardized 35mm cartridge, and that cartridge was designed by August Nagel. Now, 35mm film had been used in still cameras for quite a while by the early 1930s, most notably, of course, in the Leica cameras of the 1920s and on. But all of these cameras used proprietary systems to run the 35mm film through the camera, either proprietary cartridges or in the case of cameras like the Contax, the film was just wound onto loose spools. So Dr. Nagel's great invention was to develop a cartridge that was compatible with all of the main 35mm cameras of the time. So it fit in the Leica camera, it also fit in the Contax camera, and then additionally fit in the new Kodak Retina camera that was released the same year. So in a way, we still use his designs to this day in the form of the standardized 35mm film cassette. Okay, if you've stuck with me this far into the video, first of all, congratulations. I appreciate it. We've covered some pretty dry material, and if you've made it this far, you're probably as big of a film nerd as me. Anyway, you're probably also wondering whatever happened to the Voigtlander film pack back that I talked about earlier. And I have to confess, I did do a little bit of a bait and switch here because I introduced the film back, but then never followed up with it in this video. And the reason for that is there were just too many problems with the camera that I need to get sorted out before I commit this film to being used. So I want to sort out the light leaks in the camera first and run a couple more rolls of film through with the Rada film back. Get everything locked down tight, and then I will shoot the film pack back, which will be another fun adventure. So stay tuned for part 2.